Hi BookTube, it's Amy. We're back again reading from the Anatomy of Bibliomania by Holbrook Jackson. Beginning of the Bibliophagy or Book Eaters with a section titled A Diet of Books Considered. Diet victus or living is concomitant with all the functions, whether natural or artificial. And if some, as they say, live to eat, we must all eat to live. We may live without poetry, music, and art. We may live without conscience and live without heart. We may live without friends. We may live without books. But civilized man cannot live without cooks. Quoting from Owen Meredith there. The argument holds whether we are concerned for the preservation of the body, the mind, or the soul, for cook and poet are alike. The art of each lies in his brain. Each must be nourished on a proper diet for the retention of its form and the maintenance of its condition in the first place, and the increase or expansion of its power in the second. The things we eat by various juice control the narrowness or largeness of our soul. Onions will make even heirs or widows weep. The tender lettuce brings on softer sleep. Eat beef or pie crust if you'd serious be. Your shellfish raises Venus from the sea. For nature that inclines to ill or good still nourishes our passion by our food. Quoting there from King's Art of Cookery. And following our poet, that renowned authority, brilliant Severin, laid it down that it was part of the business of gastronomy to consider how food may influence the moral nature of man, his courage and perceptions, whether awake or asleep, in action or repose. Quoting from Physiology de Gout, translated by Anderson, according to the footnote. I have read many treatises to this purpose, but nowhere do I find any serious study of the dietics of literature or any evidence of research into this curious subject. All references are en passant, as in Pinot, his Dictionary de Bibliologie, where a bibliophage is noted as signifying celui qui mange de livres. With this bare recognition he passes on. We are not, Hilburton complains, favored with any examples explanatory of the kinds of books most in demand by those addicted to this species of food, nor of the effect of the different classes of books on the digestive organs. But he does not attempt to remedy the defect, and as no other authority has done so, I have therefore adventured upon this section, bringing together my notes, specimens, and deductions for the benefit of those who would understand more clearly the dietic relationship of books to men. I shall assemble many observations to show that books are food. Libraries, so many dishes of meat, served out for several palates. Quoting here from Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. And that we eat them from love or necessity as other foods, but most from love, and for that reason the bibliophagy may be ranked among the first of bibliophiles. Perhaps it is easier than Voltaire believed to pass from people kissing to people eating one another, quoting Philosophical Dictionary under cannibals. For as James Thompson gives out, cannibals may be the only real lovers of their fellow men. Quoting from Poems, Essays, and Fragments. And on this basis, the bibliophagy may be the best lovers of their fellow books. We may contemplate the idea with fortitude, since the performance up to now has been in the main of a metaphysical character. Or it is more tangible than that, there being no smoke without fire, the will has not yet discovered a way towards a more precise interpretation of the passion. Which is well, especially for our Rayoria, although there is fodder enough in the commoner sort of contemporary books. But since these might not be deemed eligible, it is fortunate that the practice has not been pressed to its logical conclusion, for as Voltaire said of cannibalism, if we were allowed to eat our neighbors, we should soon eat our countrymen, which would be rather unfortunate for the social virtues. Joseph Hall would take books and imitate the skillfulest cooks, which make the best dishes from manifold mixtures. and Fletcher supports him with the picture of a hungry book-eater. If all thy pipes of wine were filled with books, made of the barks of trees or mysterious writ in old moth-eaten vellum, he would sip thy cellar quite dry and still be thirsty. Then for his diet he eats and digests more volumes at a meal than there would be larks enough the sky should fall, devoured in a month in Paris. Those lines from Fletcher's The Elder Brother. Whether the inscription on the portal of the library at Alexandria was as Diodorus reports, the medicine of the mind, or as some others would have, the nourishment of the soul, it is all one, as one who shall estrange soul from mind, or say in what finally body differs from either. For we are constituents of the whole of life, as well as some total in ourselves. The analogy between body and mind is very general, says Boswell, from Life of Johnson, and the parallel will hold as to their food as well as any other particular, for as the poet infers, poets and pastry cooks will be the same, since both of them their images must frame. Chimeras from the poet's fancy flow, the cook contrives his shapes in real dough, from King's Art of Cookery. Our traffic with books is not one but many, as much gustation as devotion. At the very beginning of our pilgrimage through life, we are book-fed, as as Anatole France holds, grammars are but feeding bottles. A book, Gibbon told Lady Sheffield, takes more time in making than a pudding. The Ciceros of Leyden, Paris, and Geneva are long-standing dishes. Every book a feast of reason, and a flow of soul, a banquet of wit. Were Horace, that great master now alive, a feast with wit and judgment he'd contrive. Or more particularly, that bachelor's banquet published in 1603, wherein prepared sundry dainties to furnish their tables. Readers should approach literature as gourmets approach good food, for a good dinner is brother to a good poem. After a preliminary taste of the bibliographical Decameron, Isaac Disraeli advised Dibdin that fruits and comfits have been the Guter as yet, but I shall sit down soon to a solid meal. Quoting there from Dibdin's Reminiscences. And it's Goutier, Gouter, the French. But who is he in closest close yepent, of sober face with learned dust bespent, right well mine eyes aired the mister white, on parchment scraps ye fed and wormis height. They're from Pope's Dunciad. They devour them anywhere, as I will show. Plutarch browsed on literature and thought, secreting the most valuable constituents. Hazlitt described a human bookworm who browses on the husk and leaves of books, as the youngest fawn browses on the bark and leaves of trees. From On the Conversation of Authors, The Plain Speaker, 1826. Rosenbach records that very young children eat their books, literally devouring their contents, and he gives this as one reason for the scarcity of first editions of Alice in Wonderland and other favorites of the nursery, from Books and Bitters, Rosenbach's work. Librarians of old, says another authority, ate books, and the color of the food showed through like the green grass consumed by small green caterpillars, but in a sort of general brown faded color, a little undusted around the edges. And for writers, they are nourishing, as Joseph Glanville sufficiently declares in his essay concerning preaching, where he advises young divines, when writing their sermons, to make use of notions met with in their reading, not by tying themselves to the words of the author, but by digesting them into their store of thoughts, as the various juice of flowers is by the industrious bee, and so making them enjoyable and agreeable. When Merrick Cosban visited the Bodleian over 300 years ago, what great content he had to see the numerous students reveling at their banquet. I think that might have been meant to be content. What great content he had to see the numerous students reveling at their banquet. recalling, as like as not, Cicero's claim that studies are the ailment of youth, quoting from Great Book Collectors by Elton and something in a Latin title by Cicero. And I have lost my spot looking at the footnote. Where are we at? Cicero, youth, perchance. We'll start off with Merrick Causbon again. When Merrick Causbon visited the Bodleian over 300 years ago, what great content he had to see the numerous students revelling at their banquet, recalling, as like as not, Cicero's claim that studies are the ailment of youth, or perchance Timon of Philus, who dubbed the museum at Alexandria, where the great library was housed, a bird cage, in order to ridicule the philosophers who got their living there, because they are fed like the choicest of birds in a coop. Patterson, the bibliographer, was highly feasted on certain favorite passages in the Bibliotheca Croftsian in 1783. Hungry bibliographers meet at sales with well-furnished purses, saith mine author, and are resolved upon a sumptuous fare. And by mine author, he is referring to Dibdin in Bibliomania. Books for Robert Southey were more than metaphorically meat, drink, and clothing, in a letter to G.C. Bedford. Well, may some go so far as to argue that books are edible, and to serve their purposes must be eaten. You must eat the book, you must crush it and cut it with your teeth and swallow it. They are food and drink accessible to the culinary art, creators of appetite, satisfiers of hunger, as Robert Herrick, the beachcomber in the ebb tide, found his Virgil, which he failed to exchange against a meal, but which often consoled him in his hunger, as Robinson Crusoe had consoled Coleridge at Christ's Hospital, where the food was so bad that the boy's appetites were dampened, never satisfied, and starved young poet would crumple himself up in a sunny corner and read, fixing himself on Robinson Crusoe's island, finding a mountain of plum cake, and eating a room for himself, and then eating it into the shapes of tables and chairs, hunger and fancy. From letters edited by E.H. Coleridge, thus supporting Tom Hood's contention that they even atone for a meager diet, rich fare on the paper for short commons on the cloth, quoting there from letter to the Manchester Athenaeum, 1843. Long absence from bookish fare creates bookish hunger, which Gibbon discovers after prolonged absentation from reading during his service with the militia. Amid the perpetual hurry of an inn, a barrack, or a guard-room, he records, all literary ideas were banished from my mind. But after this long fast, the longest he had ever known, he tasted once more the pleasures of reading, and the hungry appetite with which he opened a volume of Tully remained long in his memory. George Gissing provided against a like calamity by keeping a number of appetizing books on shelves, where he could get at them readily when he hungered for them. Dr. Johnson was always hungry for books. At Mr. Dilly's on 15th April 1778, Boswell mentioned how he seized upon Charles Sheridan's account of the late revolution in Sweden, and seemed to read it ravenously as if he devoured it. During dinner he kept the book wrapped up in the tablecloth in his lap, with the avidity to have one entertainment in readiness when he should have finished another, resembling, he says, a dog who holds a bone in his paws in reverse while he eats something else which has been thrown to him. And that brings us to the end of that section there on page 158, which brings to mind for me that kid in middle school who I more than once turned around in class and found him chin down on the desk, quite literally chewing on a textbook. Not quite what Holbrook Jackson means here. Not literal chewing of books, but metaphysical chewing of the content of books. But our next section here will be varieties of book eaters, which is a little bit shorter than this one, but we'll pop the bookmark in here and return to this in the next video.